competing in, we are repeating it, we are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.
So, hello and welcome to this live broadcast on listening to the pulse of an organization. My name is Stellan Nordahl. I am one of the Emprogagers that are initiators of this whole weekend, and I'm also here with Jens, who is the other initiator, and then Emprogage as a whole as initiators. And first of all, we're celebrating Earth today. So later on, at least in Sweden, we have in a couple of hours Earth Hour. 1 hour from now, right?
Yes.
Yes, 1 hour from now we have Earth Hour. So I took the whole globe on myself, and we're going to talk a little bit on a tool that you have developed, Jens, based upon some thoughts and thought models, and also it's quite a concrete tool, I would say. And we will talk about it. We will watch how it can work and how it works on different types of organizations. So first of all, welcome everyone that are following us right now on the YouTube stream and also on the web radio. So bestforthe.world. That's where you can listen to this. So welcome everyone, and welcome Jens. Please let us know a little bit what is the listening tool?
Thank you, Stellan. So the listening tool is a holistic organizational assessment, but it is done in the way that it is very human-centric. So it is done in a very engaging way by using basically the individual, you can say humans in an organization to describe the organizational system together, to make sense of where is the organization standing currently, but also how does it function internally? How is the internal way of working of an organization? What I would describe as the pulse of an organization.
Okay, so when you say the pulse, what does the pulse say to you? What is the? I mean, this is a conceptual name, of course. Mm-hmm. But I guess that there is also some kind of an idea on what is this pulse.
I mean, the specific part that we are talking about is the way of working. To give you a concrete example, the leadership style, for example, of the organization. How are decisions made, decision making, communication flows. So basically, all the interactions between individual people that is used to govern the organization and to structure the organization. And a more maybe metaphysical perspective on that is the pulse is not only the description of simply these structures and patterns, but also the feeling that people have when they are talking about the description, basically. And this is also why it is engaging, not only in a way of describing it on a cognitive level, describing, like I said, different patterns and organizational structures, but also how do you emotionally respond to the pattern that you just described as a person being part of the whole system, being a part of that organization, and therefore also making sense of the organization together with everybody else in the organization.
And when you say listening to the pulse, I see in front of myself when you actually take the pulse on your hand and you can feel it. You can really feel the pulse, the blood in your veins and the heartbeats and so on. Is that what you actually want to? Is that the picture you want people to have?
I think that's an accurate picture. Practically, it looks a little bit different. Even though
yeah,
I
we
would
will
say
see that in a while. Of course, we will look into this very fantastic tool. I would say I've been part of one of your sessions, or what do you call it when you take the pulse? Is it like, what do you say about it? Is
I would say it's rather just an interview. I mean, but it is not just an interview, but it is really listening to the person, giving the person a space to express in a safe environment how he or she is feeling about a specific structure. For example, the leadership style in an organization. And in that way, really diving deep into personal experiences of the organizational system, the experience of the organizational system.
so it's physical actually. Then the experience is, or
I mean,
what are you looking for when you ask those questions and when you're listening to the pulse?
I mean, there are two sides. So the one side is maybe what we can describe as the physical one, the organizational structures, the patterns that we can observe, that we can make sense of together. But the other one is more the experience, so the metaphysical side of how do I experience this pattern. So to give you a concrete example, which is quite typical, I would say, for these interviews, is if you ask people, for example, about their leadership style, because that is where most people start to complain. Most employees start to complain and say, well, we have a leadership style that is, my boss is really not the best person, or I'm not really satisfied with this leadership style. So first of all, we are trying to identify what exactly do we mean then by leadership style. What are specific examples where we can see the leadership style applied in the relation between the leader and the follower, or in most organizations, the boss and the employee. But the other part of that is then, how do I, as an employee, for example, feel about my relationship to the boss? And not on a personal level, but on the level to the pattern that I just described. And that is, like I said, where most employees start to complain, but in this unsatisfaction lies also, which is an emotional response to a pattern that we described, lies also a momentum for change. Because this momentum, or the emotional response, basically tells me, well, if you are unsatisfied with what you are currently observing, then you know, or you feel, is probably the right word, you feel that a different way of doing these situations is possible. And that opens up a space for
That's right.
how does this then look like? And this gives often employees a space to express, how would you ideally solve this?
Because they map this situation, or let's say the boss's way of dealing with things. They map them to some kind of a idealistic, or maybe not idealistic, but some kind of reference map. And what you're saying right now is that also suggests that there is some kind of a need or a solution or something. This map in itself can be the solution to stuff.
Exactly.
Is that what you're applying?
So basically we're trying to explore this idealistic vision of of how they ideally see the situation. And sometimes it's not that specific already that they say, I mean, for some people it is quite clear, like this is the behavior, this is what I would like to see. But sometimes it's more, I need to describe the behavior and the pattern to observe actually my reaction, and then we try together to explore how could the ideal solution look like.
So it could be both. If this is the pattern, and this is stylistic view of it, so either you change the pattern, or you change the view of it, or you do something totally different.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a nice option you have.
I mean, in some cases, you also have to realize that the gap is too far. It's too wide. So basically, my personal experience doesn't really match with the patterns in the organization that I'm experiencing. And that leads often to the decision, okay, maybe I as an employee have to leave the organization.
Yeah, that could be a result,
and
of
I mean,
course.
some bosses are afraid to hear this, but at the same time, would you rather have an unsatisfied employee in a position that is not motivated to do any work, or would you like to have somebody who identifies with your way of working and feels energized by the patterns?
And it doesn't have to be right or wrong. It could be more or less a person in a context. If we use those two denominations, a person in a context, then you could see how fit are those, and of course you can change both the person and the organization. But you can also, as you say, move to another context, and you can also move into a context. You have maybe to leave something to get something of a higher level, I guess.
Yeah, and mostly what is happening is that the gap is not that wide, or that people want to change something about the pattern, which then is the way of transforming the organization inside out through the experiences of the employees. And they say, well, this is something I don't like here, but I also know in some way, I know the direction of how I would like to ideally see it, and then how can we work together in implementing this?
What actually arose as a question in me already a couple of minutes ago was that, do you feel that this is the first time that this is expressed, or is it something that they have expressed over and over and over again, but never someone who listened to it? I mean, it says listening to the pulse. So either you maybe haven't spoken, or maybe someone hasn't listened, or both.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the experiences I made and from the interviews I had, it is mostly about that people don't feel heard. Employees don't feel seen in their organizational context. I mean, if you think about consultancy work in any kind of assessment, what you do as the first step is always go into the organization and ask the employees, ask for information. You basically go into the organization and search for experiences, you search for patterns and try to understand it from the inside out, instead of looking at it from an outside and trying to judge it in some way. So you're always trying to go very close to the source of what you would like to change. And that is, I mean, when I started consulting, I made a joke. It's like, yeah, sorry.
I'm waiting. You're telling a joke and you start laughing before you even told
These are the best jokes, right?
Yeah, it must
only
be.
yourself was laughing. It's like, no, but what I tried to express.
Excuse me. It's fantastic. I want to hear this joke. Sorry.
Is that I basically said I don't have to do anything, because I'm basically going into the organization. I'm speaking with the employees. I'm listening to what their concerns are, to what they are seeing and what they would like to change, and then I'm packaging this information in a nice report, and then I present it to their boss. And the boss says, "Whoa, this is really great work," and this is what most consultants I guests get paid for.
Oh no, you just blow the trick. Okay, so of course there is something interesting in many ways, because this is a therapeutical tool, of course, but it's also a third-party tool. That means that you get this outer, well, maybe not an outer, but another perspective, which is not either this or that. It's something seen from another angle, and it's maybe also seen with another perception.
Yeah, and for, because this brings me to what are we actually looking for again on an organizational level? How can we really work on the organizational system? What are the how can you say it, the areas or the that you can intervene in? And I mentioned already decision making, communication patterns. So these are areas where you can enter and provide a different perspective. You can experiment with different ways of doing it, and then step back and reflect
and you can
on it.
Suggest ways of looking at it and ways to do. For those,
what I just wanted to say is that in most of my experiences, I feel that a lot of leaders, a lot of managers don't really have a good understanding of what is actually an organization. So what are actually the areas or the patterns that I can influence? For example, decision making, and if they know that decision making is one of these areas that they can experiment with, they have very little, how can I say it, like
knowledge on what to do.
Not only knowledge on what to do, but because the organizational system is always designed to keep repeating the same patterns over and over. I mean, this is the sole purpose of creating a system. So
yeah, that's actually the first part of this song that was the theme to this program, that the world we are living in and repeating in and
exactly
believing in.
And so this is also again where I think an external perspective in the help of a consultant is helpful, because the consultant can bring in, like you suggested, a different perspective.
An X factor, more or less.
Yeah, and say, well, you have been maybe stuck in this pattern. You only see this one pattern, and here is a different angle on it. And can we try and experiment with this? Can we create a safe space to test this, and then let the employees again in their experience decide on how do they feel, how do they reflect upon the experience.
Yeah, and I'm thinking here also for those who are viewers or listeners here that in one way this isn't rocket science, but in another way it really is, because it can take a lifetime to master it, and but at the same time you can be a novice to do things and try things. You don't have to have extreme experience to try stuff. Of course, you have to have some kind of a trust maybe in yourself, or that people don't like throw you out the window immediately. But this is something you can actually do immediately. And when talking about this listening tool and listening to the pulse of an organization, maybe for the listeners to not get too abstract immediately, we can go abstract in a while, but to be very concrete, you talked about interviews, but it's not only interviews.
No, exactly. That is basically the starting point where we dive into the organization, interview all levels, have a diversity of people, functions, roles represented in the interviews, and then we dive into the tensions that we can identify. And as a next step, we put these tensions on a collective level. So, for example, what that means is if only one person out of 10 interviews complains about one specific pattern or issue, it tells you something, but maybe it is not the highest priority for the organization. If, on the other hand, 5 people complain about the same issue in the same context, it tells you maybe this is the prioritized where we should focus on.
Yeah, I have a question also here, because here I have multiple ways to look at it. One is, of course, things that are in dissonance. That's what you're telling me right now. There's a lack of something, or a gap between what is and what is wanted, or whatever it is. But do you also see the congruence, when things are congruent, when they are as they are said to be? You say something and you do it. Do you find those patterns too?
I mean, there are examples, of course, on where you can see it, and then it is basically it is expressed in that people feel very joyful. They see a lot of meaning, and they speak very highly of their organization, of their way of working. They feel very engaged. I mean, all these positive attributes that we connect to employee engagement. I would say that their work and the role that they fill in, especially in regard to how do they work in the organization, gives them a lot of energy.
So there is a way of finding those ways that are working, and then amplifying, I guess, those, and then trying to get, maybe not rid of, but maybe lower the impact of those with dissonance.
Yeah, I mean, you're mentioning an interesting topic, something that I will also cover in the Evolution of Work talk tomorrow, is really the change from looking at what is deficient in an organization and trying to fix that, more towards the perspective of what is working and how can we amplify this, how can we build up on it. So basically focus on the things that give us life, that gives us energy, that are running well.
And living and so on. Yeah.
Exactly, life-affirming patterns.
That's a word I really love. I do so. Yeah, and so now we've been concrete for a while, but just for a little bit more while. Let's say I have an organization. I'm a CEO of maybe 100 people. We have we are doing maybe some kind of an industrial business. How will it look like? How is it applied, the listening tool? What can I expect from it, and what can I not expect from it? Do you have any elaboration on this?
First of all, you identify the collective tensions, and that gives you already, by turning it basically around, areas for effortless growth. And I'm saying explicitly effortless growth because the energy from your employees is already there. It just has to be guided into what do we concretely want to do about it. Because people are complaining, so the energy is there, but how can we now make use of it? How can we transform it into something that is useful and helpful for the organization? What kind of problem does it solve? And how do we ideally solve this problem or this issue in the organization? And that is something, to stay a little bit concreter here, that is what we do then in collecting these tensions in video format. So the interviews we do are recorded, and then we have an all hands on deck meeting. That means all the people who are part of a department or of an organizational unit are invited to a meeting where we will show these collective tensions and together use these videos as a way of inviting the group to reflect on, is that something that we collectively see as what is maybe not working well here, or what we could improve? And then in that workshop also work on, so what would we like to do about it?
You actually brought one of those videos from an example, which we are both part of. So maybe we should use that and maybe watch that right now. Is that okay with you to take it
Yeah,
now?
I just wanted to add, because this is also something, this is the work that we do, for lack of better word, more internally with the team development and the organizational development. But then out of the material that we create, we also create a video that we use for communicating authentically the way of working towards potential talents, towards customers. So it really shows authentically the way of working to potential co-creators.
Yeah, and before we watch this, it's a movie for 12 minutes, I guess, and it's very interesting, and not only because I'm featured in it, no, but yeah, just kidding. But what I'm thinking of is that maybe you should say a little bit about the context to where it was created. It was 1.5 years ago when you did this listening tool and listening to the pulse of an organization with Emprogage, which is the consultancy firm we are both co-creators in. And we were at that point, we had created, I would say this was almost before we had the birthday of the company. That means that what we're going to watch in a minute or two is from a context where people, 30 people something, had been engaged in co-creating a consultancy firm, which is based on self-organization, which is based on a dynamical structure, we call it a cell structure and so on. So it's not the people don't bring in experiences from that type of organization. Yes, so we know that. And the other thing is that this is approximately when it was founded, or we call it birthday, when it was given life.
But this is exactly the context that why it was relevant at that point to bring it in, because it provided these people that were part of or around this organization for that time, it provided them a common understanding of how do we work. It explained to them and gave them a common language to actually talk about specific areas.
I do agree.
And because, like you said, self-organization is still quite a new topic for many people and for many organizations. So
and you don't have to explore or even want that type of setup to use the tool.
No, exactly. This is what we said earlier. It's like we try to explore what is the right way of working for the organization in that context the organization is in.
With those people who are engaged at that very moment. Yeah.
So now we have it in a self-organized context with people that were about and just entered a self-organizing company and try to make sense of how do we actually work and how can we talk about it in a common language.
That's very interesting. And for you who are listening to the radio show, I guess there will be empty space in, or maybe you will listen to our small talking during the 12 minutes. We have no technical solution for that. But you are watching the YouTube channel. I suggest we should watch this short movie and see where it takes us. Is that okay, Jens?
Yeah, and if you want to look it up, it is called Emprogage's Way of Working.
Yeah, you can find your own telephone or computer and find it on the YouTube channel. And it's actually why we use this as an example. I would say in this program also is that it's already cleared with everyone in this movie that they are broadcasted, because we keep it up officially. So it's not something we hide away. So let's watch it then.
Emprogage is a gathering of people sharing some deep common values about wanting to make the world a better place. We work for what's best for the world by intentionally choosing empathy, proactivity and engagement, for example. I think that's a very strong mission statement, and it sort of goes through everything we do. It's an organism consisting of cells and cell areas. So if Emprogage is an organism, we have a couple of cell areas, or perhaps organs, where the consultancy part is one, educational part is one, and then we have internal cell areas for internal stuff that we need to take care of, and we have a development organ as well, where we develop things that we can use both internally and externally. And within those organs or cell areas there are cells where we gather persons with a specific interest or competence area, for example. And those cells can be more or less permanent. We can put together a cell for a task that we need to do, a project externally.
The transparency would have to be very high, so I would say there is a common denomination you can call need to know or nice to know. So need to know is the information or communication that is in the cells that you are present in. Then you will have to have a very high community level in that cell, within the cell. But you also need to have a transparency to all other cells, but you can't get notifications all the time, or so you're more on a level where you can engage if you like. So the information or whatever you call it is there for you, but it's not put in your hands all the time. So you get to choose when you like that information, or if you. But there is also a need of course, of a communication between the cells. So because of that, we have taken all the cells denominated, for instance, consultant cells, and we have a learning conference once a year, with lessons learned and practices and how to organize and good learning samples and so on. And we learn from each other. So there is a communication between the cells that is also on a need to know basis. And the same for the educational cells, and the same for and so on. So 4 times a year there is a whole day conference devoted for each of the cell areas, as we call them. And then there is also a need of course, of communication in whole Emprogage, and in a day-to-day basis that is done in a digital environment. But twice a year we meet for a lunch-to-lunch conference, where we have strategy meeting together. We get to know each other, and we also decide together on issues that can't be decided by the cells. That is, for instance, relations between the entity of Emprogage and the entity of the companies that the people themselves are running.
I think openness is a very good, good word, and also I think love.
I feel that I can bring up anything, and I mean really anything. So it's a fantastic climate in that way, so far at least. Lots of energy and lots of ideas, and lots of ideas, and also some ideas and theories being on the edge, on the border to what I can actually grasp or understand even, which is very interesting, and it's an interesting environment to be in, because I feel I grow.
Life affirming, life gets a crazy life. That means I get as much energy at least as I put in, and I get not only inspired, I also get engaged, I get proactive, I get empathic, I get togetherness, I get creativity, I get, and so on, and so on, and so on.
It's encouraging. I feel that I can do pretty much what I like, and if I don't do everything that we've talked about, that's okay, and there's probably a good reason for that. So, how should I say? It's an open, encouraging, very much encouraging style. Leadership is, of course, also other people taking initiatives.
We have chosen to have, for instance, a triad that we are demanded to take several decisions for operational things. Some of the decisions are grounded in law that needs to be taken, and some are trying to tap into different thoughts in the organizations and summing it up to what we think is a correct decision to take. And some of the things are just instant thoughts. This should be or could be very important. I think the decisions made are made out of best knowledge in that moment by the people in the room. And but also the decision isn't made carved in stone. The decisions are the best decisions we could make today, and not saying that we can't make another decision tomorrow. And that may be, because that's a new way of looking to things. And it's not the same thing as we decide something in the room and then we go to the coffee room and we have another decision. It's not that kind of decision making. But if we have new fact, new input on a decision made, then we can use that to see if our decisions are wise enough, if it's supported and supportive of our goal. And if it's not, then we can change the decision. And it's everybody that says, that decision, I don't think it's right, let's suggest. But what we can't do, I think, is make a decision, question it, and don't have any suggestion of how to improve the decision. I think that's the difference.
I feel that we all are free to take the decisions necessary to improve, to develop, to continue improving Emprogage and creating businesses and so on.
I would also say that the self is not only self-organized, the cell itself can take any decision that is needed to be able to do whatever it likes to do, or it can also take a decision that is affecting all other cells.
Yeah, I can ask any one of you to help if needed, but I don't have to ask anyone for permission. So if I see something, if I see an area of improvement or come up with an idea, it's basically up to me to make it happen, if I think it's a good thing. So it's both a responsibility and a freedom, which is fantastic.
So the value distribution is twofold. One is based on, we can call it delivery. We can call it delivery for while. On a delivery basis, 17% is staying in our joint environment, Emprogage, and 83% is going out to the cells for the work they do, and they distribute it depending on how they have done the work. And then there is the other realm, so to speak, which is based on the ownership, and the entity Emprogage itself only needs to grow its capital when there are new people joining, onboarding. And if we have some kind of a, we can call it result that is positive, and when we have it, I would say, and then it's distributed to everyone. So everyone has the same share in Emprogage. So every person has one share, every Emprogager has one share. And for that share, you get the value distribution from the result in the end of every year.
I think it's a collective of people that is more self-aware, maybe, and have been asking yourself questions for maybe longer time or in more depth than the average group of consultants, if I would like to relate us to others. I think the level of self-awareness is great. I think we don't always have the answer how to use that self-awareness, but I do think we are a brave group of people that often asks ourselves questions. I think the average Emprogager believes in a greater thing, in things that aren't feelings or emotions, energy levels, a cosmic connection. I think more than average, the Emprogagers do believe in that, I think. Or maybe are open to the possibilities, because even if I haven't been able to formulate myself, I think the openness towards, yeah, it's possible, everything is possible. It could be in any way, and it could be in several different ways at the same time.
We are a bunch of people who realize that we have a choice. We have been conscious of our own consciousness. We have practiced choice for a while, and we now got together. And I would say we are all on a common good level, not on a self-actualization level. And I would say that we're exploring that together. And that said, I would also say that, with that said, I would also say that I'm looking forward to exploring it together. And there we're back again, and thank you very much. And just for ending it, here is the contacts, listening to the pulse of an organization. And you can get hold of Jens at www.humanbusiness.eu. So welcome back, everyone. And for those who are new in the streams, I say hello to you all. I'm sitting here. My name is Stella Nordahl, and I'm sitting here together with Jens Rinnelt, and we are talking about the listening to the pulse of an organization. And when we say that, it's both some kind of a, what shall I say it, exploration of an organization's way of working, but it's also a tool in itself. So up to now we have talked about the what in the tool, what is it that you really do with this tool, or the one who is using the tool. It's about interviews, and it's also structured in, and when you do the interviews, you search for both congruence and when it's non-congruence, that is when something is yeah, there is a gap of
Personal dissonance with the
personal dissonance with the
organizational
organization.
system. Yeah.
And when you then do is that you film everything and you put it together and you produce, we can call it an internal movie, which you experience together as a way of moving forward. That is approximately what we have talked about for this first 45 minutes.
And now we have also seen the output, and another output of this is a communication video that you can use for authentically expressing your way of working, and which I believe attracts the people who identify exactly with this way of working, and therefore you, as you said, you create more congruence internally between the organizational system and the people. So basically the pulse of an organization matches the pulse or the life situation of an individual human being, and in that way you overlap these two systems so that it becomes, that it can look like a congruent unity.
And for those who are interested in what you're saying right now, we have a program of the Earth Hour, so it's in 1.5 hours from now or something like that, where you and I will explore that together, ways of finding congruence, in another program concept called FIDE. So we're coming back later on with this. But right now I'm thinking of, let's say that you have done the first part of this, listening to the pulse of an organization, and you want to move forward. How do you see that work? Is it like from doing right or doing wrong to doing right, or what is it? Is it more like, I don't know, moving forward in a direction? Or please tell us.
Yeah, I think some of the purpose of why we have shown this video of our way of working, of a more self-organized way of working, is because that could also be an inspiration for many companies. And from my understanding, working with organizational development, I see that there's more and more a demand and a request for self-organized way of workings due to increased complexity, business agility, responding faster to market demands. So all these play into why self-organization is more on the horizon. And this gives us also an indication of course, a lot of companies want to go self-organized. They want to become a teal organization. They want to be a responsive organization. So they want to implement some of these buzzwords that are flying around.
Agile and whatever.
So, or they just want to do is digital transformation, and then they realize their way of working is not matching the technology that they would like to apply. So whatever the reason, the direction is going towards self-organization, participatory decision-making.
Trust, based on trust.
Trust-based, exactly.
That's actually what we see right now in society worldwide. I mean, the whole world is in sync right now with the coronavirus, and what we can experience actually is you have to have trust that where you didn't have it before. For instance, people working from home. You can't control them any longer. Are they really working from home, or are you, whatever are you doing? Are you watching YouTube now, or what are you doing? So it has to be based on trust, and maybe this is something that people and organizations can take the time to learn right now.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to add on this is, if you want to go towards self-organization, if that is your desired, let's call it destiny, the desired state of your ideal way of working that you envision, whatever may be the reason, then the only way to get there is in a self-organized way. And that basically answers your question, how do we move on from having done the organizational assessment, having identified the organizational system from the employee perspective, after making sense of the organizational system, how do we move on from there? And this is done basically in a self-organized way, so that the result of this work is congruent with how do we do it and how do we get there. Because you can't...
Yeah, the way of working is actually what you're wanting. So
Exactly.
the goal is the road, and the road is the trip, or the journey is the goal. And
Yeah, you
that's
can't
interesting.
roll out self-management by command and control, top-down decision making. That's simply not possible.
Yeah, I love that. That's a nice reflection. For you who are thinking, can this be something I can apply in my organization? You might think, okay, is this just something in Jens' head that came out as the listening tool? And I know that in some way it's always that. I mean, we have ideas, we take them from being an idea and a thought, and we create and manifest something. So of course that's the one side of it, or one way of looking at it. But I also know that this tool is based on a lot of knowledge, a lot of fundamental methods and models for how organizations work, how we organize, how leadership works, and so on. Couldn't you elaborate a little bit on this? It would be very interesting to share with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to lie if I wouldn't say this is based on personal experience. But I would say the personal experience was the catalyst for me to look into how can we find a different way of organizing organizations, but also how can we find a different way of making sense where we are currently as an organization, and what is the direction where we want to go to. So as you said, it contains a multitude of theories coming from psychology. We spoke about dissonance and congruence, from sociology, the relationship people have in an organization, but it also is basically answering the question, what is an organization essentially? And one way that I have found of combining all these different perspectives is the Equal model from Ken Wilber, who basically says there is an individual perspective, a collective perspective, and an inner and an outer perspective, and everything happens at the same time. And that is, for example, why we talk about in the video about culture, which is the collective interior experience, structure, which is what organizations mostly work on, is and thereby hoping to create a change in the culture. And then on the individual level, the leadership style, the leadership, how do I behave towards my colleagues, towards my team, but also from which place do I make sense of it, and what is my internal resources for making these decisions. And combining all of this is then resulting in all the different aspects.
Yeah, and also seeing the map that you use when you ask the questions, and where you find the... We can use a terminology right now, which is consciousness level. Is that okay? For you who are new with this terminology, I would suggest to look it up, and we will find fantastic ways of organizing and also presenting those ideas. And so consciousness levels, which means that you can actually see, okay, this type of organization needs this or that, right?
Yeah, and exactly, and this is coming a little bit back to what we said before. If you're in your context and you only see one style of how a leader behaves, for example, in your organization, and compare it to another organization, they might have a different way of organizing their work based on a different fundamental assumptions of how life is, and how are things relating, how are people relating, and that is basically explained by different levels of consciousness, different levels of psychological development that allows simply a higher level of consciousness simply means that you are able to deal with more complexity.
Reflect on things that you maybe haven't experienced even.
Yeah.
Have you someone told you about, and you can then start.
It's a high level of abstraction.
Yeah, high level
would
abstraction. Yeah, okay, I understand that. Okay, so again, for those of you who wants to try this out, please contact Jens or anyone in Emprogage. And I guess you also would like to take this tool into a broader and wider perspective, finding consultants who can work with it. So it's also an invite, right, for people to use the tool. So if you're a consultant and you want a very powerful tool it's not just assessment, it's more than assessment. You should know that as a consultant. So if you're only into assessment, then this is at least 1 or 2 steps more, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I call it a holistic organizational assessment, but that is really just the first step, as you said. What I am really looking forward is the journey that starts afterwards, and supporting the organization through whatever is suitable for their context, for what we have identified in the organizational system, suitable methods for this specific context, and that is how can we then take the organization in the direction the collective actually wants to go. And as you said, I have not been the first one who's thinking these things. There have been many theories before. The map that I'm using is called the Reinventing Organizations map. It has been developed by a team actually from Hungary. So if you Google that, you will also find their contact details. So there have been different people already working with these methodologies, theories in different ways. And I would also like to make it available to a wider audience, definitely.
Yeah, and the reason to why you and I came in contact is and we will see this in this program called FIDE, where we elaborate on those models and the worldviews we're talking about for finding those tools for those ways of mapping organizations and so on. And you and I came close when we realized that you came from the Reinventing organizational framework, and I came from the intentional decision framework, so which is very congruent in the descriptions. It's actually overlapping and giving rise to various thoughts and various tools and various concepts.
Yeah, and then maybe if I could wish for something in the since we are speaking about this new paradigm, we're speaking about co-creation and collaboration as the way forward. I mentioned already some concepts of responsive organizations, better organizations, self-organization, learning organizations. These are, in my view, just different concepts, but they trying to speak about the same essence, just in a different language. And that is basically how we also connected. We spoke a different language, but we were talking about the same fundamental issue.
Yeah, and when you realize that you can have a dictionary, you can also find new words, and that is what is happening also right now. So again, if you're watching this or listening to this, please contact Jens or me or anyone here in Emprogage, and we will help you to see that you get in touch with those ideas, models, tools, whatever it is. And this is actually the reason to why we do this whole show and the whole weekend, and that is because of you, Jens, who had an idea that 2 weeks ago Jens said to me late Friday night, 7 o'clock, we were supposed to get home, but we were still stuck at work, and you said, I hope that people take the time now to reflect on their own lives, their organizations, and their society they live in. And also maybe, you said, they could take new decisions and intentional decisions. And then it was when we both realized that this is what we're going to do. We're going to fill 4 days of an intent for a new paradigm, and an intent of co-creation, an intent of an empathic world where human and nature live together. And in a couple of minutes we're going to end this broadcast, because of we shouldn't forget that we're actually living in the same environment that we're calling the environment, because except us, or if we weren't here, there wouldn't be an environment that to speak about, of course, because it needs someone to experience it for it to be an environment. So in a couple of minutes it's actually time for Earth Hour. So can we connect those ideas, listening to the pulse of the Earth? Could that be something?
I mean, that is essentially the same pattern, right? As an employee, how do I make sense of the organizational environment that I am in? But also, how can I, as a world citizen as a human being living on planet Earth, how can I make sense of what is currently going on? How can I feel the situation? How can I feel and make sense of what the planet needs right now? What do I need on a personal level? What society needs, but also what Mother Earth needs right now.
And I think that those are very nice words to end this, and I would say something also in conclusion here before we end this little talk together. It has been fantastic to explore the listening tool together with you, Jens. I've been curious about it for a while, and after we tested it almost 2 years ago, I realized that it's a very powerful tool to both assess but also to find a way forward. And a way forward, of course, it's what we're actually looking for right now. So listening to the pulse of the Earth is what we're going to do in 10 minutes. And then we will continue after an hour. We will continue those broadcasts, and then we will be back with a feeder program. So in another setup here in the studio. And we also like to thank those of you who are supporting us on Patreon, and in the Swedish context also it's called Swish. So we say thank you for those who contribute with support. And if you want to support us on Patreon, you find Best for the World on patreon.com. And anything else, Jens, you want to say before we close this session together?
I mean, I think we both have a very strong feeling and experience about the new paradigm and the shift that we are currently in. And for some people this might be something very abstract, something that they can't relate to. But I mean, that's also why we in some way had to test out, is our idea that we came up 2 weeks ago really working? Can we create one weekend of 24/7 live streaming and not do everything by ourselves? And we reached out to our network, and it appears that we are not alone with this thinking. We are not alone with this experience that we are having. And in 2 weeks we have over 50 different concepts, and we had so many different people. I have actually lost count, but I think we're close to 100 people who have been co-creating concepts with us in this.
From all over
Earth,
all over Earth.
Exactly.
And I would also take this opportunity, the last minutes we have, to introduce a new hashtag. We have used the hashtag Best for the World, and during this program, and we also have another interesting hashtag. It's called Likes to Do. And your hashtag Likes to Do, it's when you see or hear or something that you like and you dedicate yourself to do it. So it's not just the likes that you scroll down on Facebook or wherever you do. It is those that you put out an intent to not only like but to also do. And I want to thank Richard Paulson, who was the guy who came up with this idea to use this hashtag. So we're going to use it both together with the hashtag Best for the World and hashtag Likes to Do. So
What would you like to do?
yeah, what
Stella?
I like to do, I would now, in 8 minutes, I would like to listen to the pulse of the Earth. I want to go quiet for a while. We will shut down all the systems. The live stream will end for an hour, and we will put down all the lights here and all the mechanistical and mechanical stuff, and we will light the fire in the oven, and we will have some food together and a nice hour here in the studio. We have some more people here around here. They are getting ready for the shows to come, and we're going to have a nice a nice hour of the pulse of the planet Earth together. So thank you very much for Jens, and thank you for all you watchers and viewers and listeners, and we hope that this have been an inspiring hour of ideas and about how you can find a way of working and how you can use the tool called the Listening to the Pulse of an Organization and Listening Tool. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again. Take care and listen to the pulse of the planet Earth.
We are creating the world we're now living in. We are competing in. We are repeating in. We are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.